welcome to another chapter! In this episode, we've compiled 6 historical events from the last week of April!
Hello, my people. Did you know that before any vaccine existed, doctors did something that today would seem like absolute madness? They took pus from a person sick with smallpox and smeared it on an open wound voluntarily, and that was considered advanced medicine. This was called variolation, and although it sounded like torture, it worked halfway. The problem? You had a real chance of dying in the attempt. Humanity needed something better and found it in the most unexpected place, a cow. Let's go with some questions. Why do you think the word vaccine comes from the Latin word for cow? What does cow mean? Comment before I tell you. How old was the first human vaccinated in history? Put your answer in the comments, and let's go with the last question. How many people did smallpox kill throughout human history? Millions? Hundreds of millions? Guess. Wait until the end of this segment and I'll give you your answers.
An invisible monster was chewing off the faces of millions worldwide, while humanity begged on its bloody knees. Everyone was praying for a damn miracle, but salvation crawled out of the most disgusting place you can imagine. Forget those sterile, spotless labs. Humanity's absolute biggest flex was born from literal cow pus and a sketchy, entirely illegal experiment jammed into a defenseless kid's arm. Yeah, they totally used an orphan as a lab rat. A plague so ridiculously lethal, it straight up rewrote global history, slaughtering entire empires without breaking a sweat. But what actually went down with that kid when they shot straight up death into his veins? Trust me, your boring history books totally scrubbed the dark, twisted side of this heroic medical stunt. We flipped from absolute pants-shitting panic and wild, superstitious ignorance to wielding the raw power of gods. On May 5th, 1796, pure chaos was weaponized into hardcore scientific dominance. But the real, unfiltered secret of that day is way more sinister. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, yes, Akomapa, Mary, I have there your answers. And Edward Jenner discovered that milkmaids contracted cowpox, a mild version, and then were completely immune to human smallpox. He used that animal disease to create the first vaccine in history. The cow literally saved us. In the second answer, his name was James Phipps, an 8-year-old boy, son of Jenner's gardener. Today it would be unthinkable, but in 1796, Jenner injected him with cowpox and weeks later injected him with real human smallpox to test the theory on the boy. He did not get sick and proved that the experiment had worked. In the third response, it is estimated that smallpox killed more than 300 million people in the 20th century alone, more than all the world wars combined, and it was declared eradicated in 1980, being to this day the only infectious disease that humans have completely eliminated from the planet. Wait, I need you to process what you just saw. Today we have huge debates about vaccines. There is distrust, there are questions, and there is fear. And look where we come from an 18th century doctor who had to convince the world that a cow disease could save human lives. They laughed at him at the time, attacked him, told him he was crazy. And yet here you and I are alive because someone observed, took risks, and did not give up. If the Anafaka broke your mind. You see, there's the subscription button right down there. Yes, it's waiting for you. And stay with us to learn more relevant facts from history. Well, my people, did you know that today in the Vatican there is an elite corps dressed in brightly colored uniforms that look like they're from a carnival? Yes, those soldiers in yellow and purple you see, tourists take pictures of them and children laugh at their hats. But what almost no one knows is that this cheerful uniform hides one of the bloodiest and most brutal stories of loyalty in European history. In a single day, 147 men chose to die instead of fleeing, and thanks to that sacrifice, the papacy survived, and this is what happened on the 6th of May, 1527. Let's go with 3 questions. The army that attacked Rome that day was not from a declared enemy of the church, it was from someone who considered himself the greatest defender of Catholicism. Do you know who we are talking about? Second question, of the 189 Swiss guards who protected the Pope that day, how many survived? 150, fewer? Put a number, let's guess and see. And third question, how long was the Pope locked up in the Castel Sant'Angelo after escaping? Days, weeks, months? I'll give you the answers in a moment. Stay tuned to the video.
History's most sacred pool of blood isn't at the foot of a cross, but on the Vatican steps. One lethal miscalculation unleashed an apocalypse of flesh and steel, where blind faith couldn't stop the blades. Picture the suffocating panic, mutinous, starving, ruthless mercenaries shattering Rome's golden doors with axes. Their target wasn't just gold, they wanted the Pope's head on a pike. But right in the middle of the slaughter, 147 men made the most brutal choice that rewrote military history forever. They knew they were dead meat. Every deep slash, every agonizing scream echoing off the walls bought one extra blood-soaked second for the pontiff to flee through a secret passage. But what chilling secret did that pitch-black tunnel hide while mercenaries butchered the royal guards? That's the real mystery. The massacre was so extremely brutal that the immaculate St. Peter's steps became completely unrecognizable. That's how the Swiss Guard legend was born. They aren't just ornamental soldiers for tourists, they are the direct heirs to a bloodbath. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, now watching the video, let's go with the answers. The first answer was Charles V, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. His troops of German mercenaries called Landsknechts, many of them Lutherans and Spanish soldiers, got out of control. They had gone months without pay and were furious, and Rome became their payment. Carlos V himself said he was terrified, although he never ordered the attack to stop. Only 42 of the 147 died fighting on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica to buy time. Those 42 survivors managed to take Pope Clement VII through a secret corridor to the Passetto di Borgo to the Castel Sant'Angelo. Without them, the papacy would not exist as such. And the third answer, my friends, Pope Clement VII was trapped in Rome for almost 6 months while the city was sacked, burned, and destroyed. The troops of Charles V turned churches into stables, melted artworks into coins, and killed between 12,000 and 45,000 people. It was the end of the Roman Renaissance in a single day. I want us I want us to imagine something. You are on guard duty, you know that thousands of armed, hungry soldiers with nothing to lose are approaching. Your commander has already fallen. Your comrades are dying one by one beside you. You have 2 options. Either you run or you stay. Those 147 men stayed not because they were forced, but because they had sworn to do so. That is why every 6th of May, the new recruits of the Swiss Guard swear loyalty on that exact date. It is not a coincidence, it is memory and honor. I ask you something and I want you to really think about it before responding in the comments. Do you think that level of loyalty exists today in work, in friendship, anywhere? Write to me. I'm interested in what you think. And if you've made it this far, my friend, you know more stories than 99% of the people who have gone to the Vatican to take selfies with the Swiss Guard. Follow us so you don't miss the next date, and I swear this story is more incredible than the previous one. Follow us below.
Follow us.
Before that ship set sail, Germany published a notice in New York newspapers warning that any ship sailing in a war zone would be sunk. The Lusitania set sail anyway, the passengers boarded anyway, and 1,198 people paid for that decision with their lives in less than 18 minutes. Germany published warnings in American newspapers before the trip, but there is something even more shocking. That notice appeared right next to another advertisement.
What do you think that other ad was about? Comment down below,
The Titanic took almost 3 hours to sink after being hit. How long did it take for the Lusitania? Put your answer in the comments. And the last question, the sinking of the Lusitania killed 118 Americans. Do you think that was enough for the United States to enter World War I immediately? Comment yes or no. We'll go over your answers shortly.
They sold you the lie that a whole nation went to war out of heroism? Bullshit. It was because of a cold-blooded, covered-up mass murder. Picture this, absolute luxury floating right in the middle of the ocean. Champagne, laughter, the global elite celebrating life. But beneath their feet, a lethal secret was hidden in the cargo holds. A steel hunter lurked in the pitch-black, freezing water. With zero warning, a torpedo violently shreds the hull. All hell breaks loose in a matter of seconds. The colossal ship tilts violently toward its watery grave. Screams of absolute terror drowned out by twisting metal. Pure panic consumes 1,200 trapped souls on board. Mothers, kids, millionaires, all equal, facing the freezing death. 20 minutes. That's all it took for the giant to vanish. But why did the British military escorts just abandon it in the kill zone? Did they actually want it to sink? Bodies washing up on the Irish coast told a very dark story. 128 citizens from a neutral powerhouse wiped out. The next day's newspapers altered the world's reality forever. Uncontrollable fury crossed the Atlantic like a shockwave. It was a flawless trap to drive a sleeping giant into the slaughter. Classified dispatches were burning up in London and DC. Pale faces reading highly redacted top-secret telegrams. Public outrage became the ultimate weaponized fuel. Propaganda posters flooded streets soaked in pure vengeance. A master plan orchestrated from the shadows of power. Or a German sub-captain's most catastrophic fuck-up. Official story reeks of gunpowder, blood, and lies. Over 1,000 ghosts under the Irish Sea still scream for the truth. What went down on May 7th, 1915 engineered your reality right now. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, friend, here I have your answers. The German war notice appeared published right next to the announcement of the Lusitania's own voyage in several New York newspapers. Some passengers read it, some joked about it, many simply did not believe it. The Cunard Line, the company that owned the ship, reassures them by saying that the Lusitania was too fast for any submarine. Let's go with the second answer, 18 minutes. Only one torpedo was enough, although it is still debated today whether there was a second internal explosion, possibly due to ammunition cargo that the ship was secretly carrying. That's why it sank so quickly that most of the lifeboats couldn't even be launched properly. And the last answer is no. The United States waited almost 2 years until April of 1917. President Woodrow Wilson continued with his policy of neutrality, but Lusitania planted a seed of anger in public opinion that did not fade. When no more provocations arrived, not including the famous Zimmermann telegram where Germany proposed to Mexico to attack the United States, the seed exploded. The Lusitania was not the straw that broke the camel's back, it was the entire glass. There is something that haunts me about this story, and it is that they knew, the passengers knew there was a risk, the company knew, even the captain knew they were sailing in dangerous waters at reduced speed to save coal, ignoring the British Admiralty's safety instructions. And yet, everyone went ahead. Why did no one believe it would really happen? That is one of the things one has to question. And that has a name. It's called normalcy bias, the human tendency to underestimate threats because it has never happened before. It happens to us today too. It happens all the time. Well, my people, if you want to know more relevant facts about history, you know you can follow me down here. Hit the bell and I promise the next date will be very interesting. If something comes to mind, remember it because many times it's a warning about why you didn't think or what could happen to you. Write it in the comments. We won't judge you. It has happened to all of us.
St. Pierre was known as the Paris of the Caribbean. It was the richest, most elegant, and most vibrant city in the entire region. It had operas, trams, sea view cafes, and in less than 2 minutes, it disappeared from the map forever. Not because of a war or a bomb, but because no one wanted to listen to the volcano. Let's go with our interactive trivia. First question. The authorities of Martinique made a decision that sealed the fate of St. Pierre. Do you think it was due to negligence, ignorance, or something darker? Comment before I tell you at the end of the video. Second question, a pyroclastic flow is not lava. It is something much more terrifying. Does anyone know what temperature it reaches and at what speed it can travel? Put your answers down here. And third question, it is said that among the very few survivors of Saint-Pierre, one survived precisely because they were in the worst place anyone could be. Where do you think they were? Comment down below and wait until the end of the video so we can see those curious answers.
30,000 people were literally baked alive in under 3 minutes just because they listened to shady politicians instead of Mother Nature. Picture the sky over a totally idyllic Caribbean island turning pitch black, like death. The suits in charge said, everything's totally fine, chill. But the beast of a volcano underneath was roaring, begging for fresh meat. And then the abyss just blew wide open. A superheated 1800-degree ghost cloud crashed down at the speed of a frickin' bullet train, wiping an entire city straight off the map. Buildings melting, ships boiling alive in the harbor. Nowhere to run, 0 places to hide. But here's the mind-bending glitch no one talks about. Among thousands of charred corpses littering the streets, there was one guy who totally broke physics. He was sitting right in the dead center of hell, and somehow he casually survived the apocalypse. Why did the Grim Reaper give this one soul a pass? The ashes covered up some dark, greedy secrets. Whole families turned into instant ash statues. All that Caribbean luxury vaporized into thin air. The clock tower frozen on the exact fatal second. The biggest disaster they tried to sweep under the rug. A massive cover-up soaked in innocent blood. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, man. You won't believe the twisted reason they died. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, my people, here are your answers. The first answer, it was purely political. Governor Louis Mute needed rural voters to come to the city for the elections on May 11. Evacuating Saint-Pierre was not going to be easy and would have dispersed the population, so he formed a scientific commission that declared the city was safe. He and his wife stayed in Saint-Pierre to set an example, and both died in the eruption. Second answer, a pyroclastic flow is a mixture of gas, ash, and rock at high temperatures between 400 and 700 degrees Celsius, traveling at speeds of up to 700 kilometers per hour. You can't run, you can't hide in a building, you can't survive in its path. The one that destroyed Saint-Pierre took less than 2 minutes to ravage the entire city. His third answer, Louis-Auguste Siparis was in jail, a convicted prisoner, locked in an underground stone cell with a small slit as the only ventilation. That saved him. He suffered severe burns but survived. When he was rescued days later, he was surrounded by a city of 30,000 dead. Afterwards, he was pardoned and ended up working in the Barnum and Bailey Circus as the man who survived the end of the world. Here we pause, my people, and I want us to think together about something uncomfortable. No one in Saint-Pierre was stupid. They were normal people, merchants, families, Buddhists, students living their lives in the most beautiful city in the Caribbean. The signs were there. The volcano had been warning and rumbling for weeks, but there was an official narrative that said, "We are fine." And people chose to believe it because it was easier, na? That is not something that only happened in 1902. Throughout history, many similar events have occurred, and people prefer to believe the common narrative. The question I ask myself and leave to you is this: how many times in history or even today have we ignored clear signs because the official version was the most comfortable? I am not asking you to answer out loud if you do not want to, but think about it. And if you have an answer, you know where to leave it. Write down here, like this there, in the comments. 30,000 people, 2 minutes, and the prisoner who survived to tell it in the circus. If this story got you thinking, subscribe, because every date on this channel hides something that history books decided not to tell you. See you. But on May 7, Manta and the 1945 companies in Perion, Germany had already officially surrendered with a signature and everything. But there's something the West doesn't tell you that often. No, that signature wasn't enough for Stalin because the surrender had been to the Western allies and he wanted his own surrender. He's had to be in Berlin in person and one day later. And that is how the Second World War ended twice. Let's go with our interactive trivia. Question number 1. The Soviet Union lost more people in the Second World War than any other country. How many deaths do you think we are talking about? Think of an approximate number. Second question, who signed the surrender on behalf of Germany to the Soviets because Hitler was already dead? Do you know who was in charge of the Reich in its final hours? Comment. And third question, why do you think that today, in 2026, May 9, remains a geopolitically explosive date? What does this celebration have that goes beyond remembering history? Comment, and at the end of the video, we will clear up our doubts.
The end of the war wasn't about peace. It was a bloody, cutthroat race. They fed you this lie that it all ended with cheers and champagne. The truth, buried under Berlin's rubble, is way darker, man. May 9th, 1945. While the whole world partied hard, inside a suffocating concrete box, the Nazi high command was signing their ultimate death warrant. But who was actually pulling the strings in that room? The Soviets didn't just roll in for a polite surrender. They wanted to crush an empire's soul into the dirt. Zhukov staring them down with dead, icy eyes.
Keitel scribbling his name with violently shaking hands. Outside, a city practically nuked back to the Stone Age. Red flags flying high over a burning Reichstag. Soviet troops collecting some seriously brutal payback. But here is the dirty little secret they leave out of your history class. Someone massive was missing from that table, and a Black Ops pact was already setting up the Cold War. Stalin had dropped a ruthless, chilling order. Leave no prisoners with leverage breathing. That treaty was dripping with invisible blood. Millions went totally wild in the streets of Moscow. But in the shadows, US and Russian spies were already kicking off the real terrifying hunt. Top secret files turning to ash in seconds, elite Nazi scientists getting snatched in the dead of night. Victory Day was literally just the curtain rising. A sick theater to slice up the globe like a pie. What they signed wasn't peace, no way. It was the countdown clock for a nuclear apocalypse. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, my people, here I come with your answers. First answer, between 26 and 27 million people. To put it in context, the United States lost around 420,000 people, the United Kingdom 450,000, and the Soviet Union lost more than 60 times what the United States lost. Of every 8 people who died in the Second World War, 1 was Soviet. That explains why the 9th of May is not just any date in Russia, it is a wound that still has not healed. Second answer, Wilhelm Keitel, the Field Marshal of the German Army, was the one who signed. He did so in the early hours of May 9th in Berlin before Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov. Keitel arrived within the Yamna with his command baton, full uniform, and monocle. The image is chilling, a defeated general signing the end of his world with the same solemnity with which he had signed war orders years earlier. He was executed in Nuremberg in 1946. Third response, why does Russia actively use the military parade in Red Square each year as an instrument of national identity and political legitimacy? It is not just a tribute, it is a message to the world about Russian might. Stalin built the narrative of the Soviet Union as the savior of humanity on this victory. Putin currently has continued that narrative. May 9th is not just history, it is present, and understanding it helps to understand many of the conflicts we see today. That's what impacts me the most at this historical moment. When the war in Europe ended, the Allies sat down to celebrate together. Churchill, Roosevelt, Truman, Stalin. Well, there are historical photographs and handshakes and smiles for the press. But already at that moment, yes, each of them knew that the next war had already begun. Only this one would not have nuclear bombs for the time being. And that leads me to ask you something directly. When you hear a historical date, a fact, and an official truth, then do you wonder who is telling it and why they are telling it that way? Because history is not what happened, it is what someone decided to remember. Leave me your response below. I'm interested in knowing what you think about this. The Second World War ended twice on two different dates with two different narratives, and both are still alive today. If this channel makes you see the difference and you already know what to do, subscribe, and the next video will show you that each date hides a layer that no one had shown you. Subscribe below and hit the bell. He was 19 years old. He never wanted to be king. He wrote it himself in his diary the day his grandfather died and the crown fell upon his head. My God, guide us and protect us. We are too young to reign. He didn't say it with humility. He said it with terror, and he was right. Let's go with our interactive trivia. Question number 1. The coronation of Louis XVI cost a fortune in a country on the brink of bankruptcy. How much do you think was spent on that single event? Comment your estimate below. Second question, Marie Antoinette, the wife of Louis XVI, was Austrian. Why do you think the French people hated her so intensely from the beginning? And let's go with our last question. Louis XVI was guillotined during the French Revolution, but before that, he had a real chance to escape with his family. Do you know what happened? Did he manage to flee or not? Logically, he did not escape because, well, they beheaded him, but what could have happened? Stay with us if you want to know the beheaded outcome of all this.
Did you know the most expensive, out-of-touch flex in history literally caused thousands of heads to roll? No cap. I mean, literally. Picture an entire nation starving to death in the gutters, while their brand new boss decides to drown himself in gold, silk, and heavy diamonds. Not a metaphor, guys. This is raw history. It all went down in the gloomy vaults of Reims Cathedral. The main character? An insecure, terrified kid. Louis XVI, grabbing absolute unchecked power. But there was a dark, twisted secret hidden inside that very crown. A morbid detail that sealed his brutal fate that exact same day. What did the Archbishop whisper at the altar that predicted his gruesome slaughter? The clout chasing that afternoon was genuinely sickening. Velvet stained with pure, unchecked arrogance. Endless banquets and deafening cheers. Meanwhile, right outside those massive cathedral doors, desperate people were eating dirt and ash just to survive. The country's bank account was bleeding red. And this absolutely unhinged, over-the-top coronation was the final nail in the monarchy's cursed coffin. The delusion bubble was microseconds away from bursting violently. The guillotine was already sharpening its cold blade in the shadows of Paris. But what actually happened during the secret oath phase? A miscalculation so unbelievably stupid, it doomed the entire empire to a fiery hellscape. They've always sold you the ending of this broken fairy tale, but your textbooks hid the real start of the bloodbath from you. And trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The dirtiest conspiracy behind the Headless King is one tap away. Tap the full video below to see what else they hid from you on the day everything changed.
Well, my people, let's go with our answers. First, it is estimated that the coronation cost around £7 million at a time when France was burdened with a colossal debt from financing wars, including the independence of the United States. To put it in perspective, that money could have fed thousands of peasant families for years. Instead, it was spent on a single day of pomp and silk for a court that lived on another planet. Second answer, because she was the perfect symbol of everything that was wrong. She was a young, extravagant foreigner. They called her Madame Deficit because her spending on dresses, jewelry, and parties was scandalous while France was sinking. But there is a brutal irony. Marie Antoinette actually never said let them eat cake. That phrase was never hers. It was invented by her political enemies. However, the lie was so useful and powerful that it survived 250 years. Third answer, Louis XVI and his family attempted it in 1791. They fled Paris disguised at night. It is known as the flight to Varennes. They were just a few hours away from crossing the border and reaching safety. But Louis was recognized in a small town according to the story because his face appeared on the coins. He was captured and returned to Paris. That failure sealed his fate. 2 years later, in January of 1793, he was guillotined in the Place de la Révolution. There is something I find impossible to ignore in this story. Louis XVI was not a monster. The most serious historians agree that he was a basically decent man, shy, indecisive, who loved locksmithing and hunting, who cared for his family. He was not cruel, he was not bloodthirsty, and yet he presided over the collapse of everything, not out of malice, but perhaps something more dangerous by not understanding the world he lived in. He was crowned with all the pomp of absolutism in a country that could no longer sustain that theater. Not because he wanted to humiliate anyone, but simply because he did not see what was happening outside the palace. And that leads me to a question that is not just historical. How many leaders, politicians, business people, or of any kind fall today for exactly the same reason? Not because of corruption, not because of evil, but because they live so deeply inside their bubble that they don't see coming what everyone else is already experiencing. He was 19 years old, did not want to be king, and history turned him into the symbol of everything a society can accumulate until it explodes. If this channel makes you see history as what it really is, a mirror of the present, follow us. Well, my people, this is the end of this recap chapter of a series of events by calendar day that have impacted the history of humanity. It was a pleasure to share with you and give a small brushstroke of history and events, curiosities. And remember, if you want to know more about what each day of the year hides in calendar order, subscribe and click the bell down here to remind you what happens on the day you are currently watching.